Hi, my name is Phil, and I'm building a Chesapeake Light Craft Teardrop Camper. It's a sticky job full of dust and many ways to use epoxy. Come join me in my quest to find the right mixture of epoxy and wood flour so that it meets the requirements of peanut butter consistency. In my last video, I showed the installation of the bulkhead. The bulkhead is a partition that separates the galley from the main cabin in the camper. The galley flat is the flat part of the galley, and also the horizontal bit. The galley is built like the hatch on a hatchback car. In between installing the bulkhead and installing the galley flat, I installed the hatch lid, but did not record any video. I think I actually stopped the camera instead of starting it. Anyway, the hatch lid is a lip or drip edge on the back of the hatch. It gets stitched and filleted in place, and then a temporary shim, basically a long piece of wood, gets temporarily tacked to the hatch lid with CA glue to help locate the galley flat relative to the hatch. It sits 3/8 of an inch below the edge of the lid. I find it helpful to tape my cheapo depth gauge in position for this sort of measurement. In retrospect, I don't think I did a very good job of making sure everything fit together. While we're on the topic of the hatch lid, it isn't reinforced with glass until you glass the exterior of the camper, so it's fairly delicate. Be careful not to apply too much force to it or lean on it, or you'll find yourself gluing the fillet back together. I had to put a stitch back in and tack it with CA glue to hold it until later when it was epoxied on the outside and glassed in. Look at the lid where it meets the side of the camper. You'll see it doesn't quite meet. I'm not sure what that means. I interpreted the manual to say you need to install the lid on the hatch straight up and down, but the edge of the panel it should line up with wasn't exactly vertical. I'll wrestle with that later, whether to fill the gap or leave it. Since everything in the galley, including the battery if you install one, sits on the galley flat, it needs to be quite strong, so it gets reinforced with wooden stiffeners. As the build guide says, these are going to be in the space where your feet go when you sleep, so it's a good plan to round them over. I used my router with a roundover bit in it. After a couple of test passes with some scrap wood, I ran the stiffeners through the router. Then I eased the corners left by the router by hand to soften them. The build manual mentions that you need to be sure the stiffeners are glued to the opposite side from the routed slot. If you look at the galley flat, there should be a slot routed on one of the sides. This eventually will face up, and the side with the stiffeners will face down. CLC has drilled some holes in the galley flat so you can line up your stiffeners. I laid out the location of the stiffeners based on the drill holes, and I used a square to pencil them in. They get glued on with epoxy thickened with something called cellofill. I used a couple of cans of paint to press the stiffeners onto the galley flat. Once the epoxy had hardened and the stiffeners were stiffening properly, I test fitted the galley flat and found that it would not go into the shell. I was a bit concerned about all the scraping, and the flat kept catching on wire stitches that attached the shell to the cradle. The options were potentially crack a fillet somewhere and find that I still can't get the flat past the fiberglass tape between panel 3 and 4, and the stitch is still holding the camper to the cradle, or to take out my trusty plane and rasp and remove some material, so I chose the latter, although later I concluded that I removed a bit too much on the sides. galley flat sits on top of the bulkhead, and 2 tabs or tenons fit into either side of the bulkhead. Once you have the flat fitted, you will need to remove it again and use thickened epoxy to butter the top of the bulkhead, or the underside if you're thinking of the trailer right side up, and the slots or mortises in the bulkhead where the tenons go. When you set the galley flat in place, some of that epoxy is going to squeeze out, so CLC recommends masking off the bulkhead along the edge and at the holes where the tabs on the flat go. Now is also the time to mask off the hatch lid so later you don't glue it to the galley flat. Pay attention to the way I applied the masking tape. I figured I didn't want squeeze out falling into the cabin, so I masked above the level of the galley flat instead of just being flush with the bulkhead. This meant that when I installed the flat, I couldn't see very well how it was positioned. I did the usual with the fillets, and as always, I cleaned up the squeeze out and the little side tracks on either side of the fillet with a plastic spreader. As I was sanding the fillets and some of the rougher thickened epoxy, I spotted the mistake I had made earlier. I looked very calm, but there was a dust mask hiding my sadness. Inside, I died a little that day. I'll let myself explain it. Well, this is disappointing because I put some blue tape here to protect the bulkhead from getting too much epoxy, thickened epoxy on it. The galley flat, did not line up with the edge. I couldn't see that I was leaving a gap here, which is kind of a shame. And unfortunately, that leads to when I install the cabin shelf, there will be a bow here and that will leave gaps. So I'm not sure exactly how to correct this. I'm tempted to try to come in here and cut this out, but that would be a very delicate operation, and I don't know if I've got the tools and the skill set. Well, after a bit of thought, I decided to chisel away all the thickened epoxy I could and split the galley flat from the bulkhead. It's clear this was the right choice because the connection between the two was weak enough that it worked. I used a flush cutting saw to cut part of the fillet at either side of the bulkhead at the extensions. This was the final bit that needed to be released in order for me to clamp the bulkhead and galley flat flush. I used popsicle sticks to spread the bulkhead and the flat apart, and then I injected thickened epoxy into the crack. I also took the opportunity to fill in some voids in the mortises. I clamped this flush with what I call a BAC, a big clamp, with a square of mylar to prevent it from being glued to the bulkhead. A little cleanup sanding later, and this actually turned out quite well. I tilted the camper level and weighted the galley flat down while the epoxy hardened. Well, that's some more of my greater mistakes building this camper. As you can see, it's possible to recover from them. I hope you enjoyed watching my mistakes as much as I enjoyed making them. There are plenty more videos to come, full of mistakes. If you enjoyed this video, or even if your cat just sat on the remote, please like and subscribe. And don't forget to ring the bell so you get notified when I upload another video. Thanks for watching.